before the sun rises and the world shakes off the shroud of sleep, the town of Meadowbrook hums with a soft stillness, the kind of stillness that hides stories, struggles, and unspoken resilience. Among the quiet streets and shadowy corners, a figure emerges each morning, defined not by grandeur or applause, but by determination. Elena Harper, a single mother of two, walks with a purpose that defies the silent stares and biting cold of the pre-dawn hours. Her journey is not extraordinary in the way tales of great heroes often are. There are no battles fought, with swords or dragons slain. Yet, in her worn sneakers and weathered jacket, Elena carries the weight of two young lives on her shoulders. Every step she takes is for Jordan and Lila, her children who dream in warmth, while their mother marches toward a future she refuses to let slip away. But Meadowbrook is not kind to its invisible warriors. Whispers follow her steps, fueled by ignorance and judgment, while Elena remains steadfast. The world sees her struggle, but few see her strength, until one morning, someone does. And from that moment, Elena's quiet battle begins to ripple through Meadowbrook, changing lives in ways no one could have foreseen. This is not just a story about a woman walking to work. It's a story about resilience, about the unyielding love of a mother, and about a town learning the power of compassion. Above all, it's a story that reminds us that even the smallest acts of kindness can ignite extraordinary change. The sky was still a deep indigo when Elena Harper pulled on her faded gray hoodie and laced up her sneakers. The soft creak of the wooden floor beneath her feet echoed faintly in the tiny kitchen as she grabbed her bag, careful not to wake the children still tucked in their beds. For Jordan, 12, and Lila, 8, mornings were for dreaming. Dreams Elena would stop at nothing to protect. The door clicked shut behind her, and the crisp air of Meadowbrook nipped at her skin. The streetlights cast long shadows across the empty roads, illuminating the frost that glittered like scattered diamonds on the pavement. Elena tucked her chin into her scarf, adjusted the straps of her worn backpack, and began her 10-mile journey to the diner. The town was quiet at this hour, save for the occasional hum of a car engine or the distant bark of a dog. Meadowbrook was small, charming even, with its rows of picket fences and cozy porches adorned with hanging plants. But its warmth had never extended to Elena, whose solitary figure often drew curious glances and hushed conversations. To the townsfolk, she was the single mother walking through their lives, her struggles a spectacle they observed from behind frosted windows. As her sneakers met the pavement, Elena's thoughts turned to her children. Jordan had been struggling with his math homework, but he never let her see his frustration. Lila, ever the dreamer, had scribbled yet another picture of the three of them on a sunny beach. "One day, Mom," Lila had said, her wide eyes brimming with hope, "we'll go on a real vacation." "One day," Elena had promised, her voice steady despite the ache in her heart. The walk to the diner wasn't easy. The biting cold seeped through her jacket, and the weight of her responsibilities felt heavier with each step. But Elena knew no other way. Her husband, once her partner in this journey, had disappeared from their lives 3 years ago, leaving behind unanswered questions and an unpayable stack of bills. Since then, she'd vowed never to let her children feel the depth of that abandonment. The diner sat at the edge of town, a beacon of fluorescent light against the gray dawn. It wasn't much, but it paid the rent and kept the lights on. Elena slipped in through the back door, greeted by the familiar smell of frying bacon and stale coffee. "Morning, Elena," called Mrs. Peterson, the head cook, from behind the grill. Elena offered a small smile, hanging her coat on the peg near the kitchen door. The morning rush would come soon, bringing with it hurried orders and weary truck drivers. But for now, The diner was still. She tied her apron around her waist and prepared for another long day. Outside, the town stirred awake. From the warmth of his car, Mayor Robert Hayes sipped his coffee and glanced at the rearview mirror. A figure caught his attention. There she was again, walking with a stride that seemed as deliberate as it was weary. He'd noticed her many mornings before, but never thought much of it. Today, though, something made him linger. Her resilience reminded him of his own mother, who'd raised him on a seamstress's wages after his father's untimely death. He'd seen that same determined walk every day of his childhood. Shaking his head, Hayes turned onto Main Street, but the image of Elena stayed with him. At the diner, the breakfast crowd trickled in, and Elena moved through the chaos with practiced ease. "Coffee's fresh," she said to a grizzled trucker at the counter. She refilled cups, jotted down orders, and ignored the dismissive glances from a table of well-dressed women by the window. "She's always walking," one of them whispered. "Why doesn't she just get a car?" Elena heard, but she didn't react. She'd long grown used to the whispers, the subtle looks that questioned her choices. By the time her shift ended, the sun was high, casting a golden glow over Meadowbrook. As she stepped outside, the wind carried a faint warmth that hinted at the coming spring. Elena adjusted her backpack and began the long walk home, her mind filled with thoughts of Jordan and Lila. The road stretched out before her, but she walked with the quiet strength of someone who refused to yield. For all the judgment and hardship, Elena knew one thing for certain. She'd keep walking. For her children, for their dreams, and for the hope that one day her steps would take her somewhere better. As the first rays of sunlight began to filter through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the modest living room, Elena Harper quietly sipped her cup of tea. It was her rare moment of solace before the demands of the day set in. The soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old house were the only sounds accompanying her thoughts. Across the hall, Jordan and Lila still slept soundly, unaware of the trials their mother endured to make their world a little brighter. Her thoughts drifted to the life she had before her husband, Thomas, left abruptly 3 years ago. The memory of his departure was etched vividly in her mind. It was a stormy evening when Thomas walked out the door, leaving behind confusion, unpaid bills, and broken promises. His absence was sudden and final, and with it came an avalanche of responsibilities. The sting of his betrayal lingered, but Elena had no choice but to pick up the pieces and carry on. She thought of how she'd sold her engagement ring to keep the house, the only semblance of stability for her children. It had been a difficult decision, but one she'd made without hesitation. If it meant Jordan and Lila could stay in the home they'd grown up in, she would do it 1,000 times over. The weight of these memories lingered as she pulled on her jacket and prepared for the long walk to the diner. Every step she took, every dollar she earned, was for her children. She reminded herself that the path ahead was paved not with resentment, but with love and an unwavering resolve to build a better future for Jordan and Lila. The streets of Meadowbrook were waking up as Elena made her way to work. Her steps were purposeful, her gaze fixed forward. Meadowbrook was the kind of town where everyone knew each other, and everyone knew everyone else's business. The tight-knit nature of the community was both a blessing and a curse. While some neighbors offered genuine smiles and warm greetings, others were quick to judge. Elena felt the weight of those judgments every morning as she walked past the rows of houses. "Why doesn't she just take the bus?" she'd overheard Mrs. Peterson whisper to a friend at the local grocery store the week before. "It's not like she's saving money by walking everywhere." The words stung, but Elena's resolve remained unshaken. She couldn't afford the bus fare every day, and even if she could, She preferred to walk. It gave her time to think, to reflect, and to prepare herself for the challenges ahead. This was a choice she'd made, a small way of asserting her independence in a world that often tried to strip it away. At the diner, the smell of fresh coffee and sizzling bacon greeted her as she stepped through the door. She tied on her apron and took her place behind the counter, ready for the morning rush. Elena worked tirelessly, pouring coffee, taking orders, and offering a kind word to every customer who walked through the door. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, but her mind was often elsewhere, thinking about what needed to be done to keep her family afloat. It wasn't just the long hours that tested her resilience, it was the little moments of condescension and judgment she encountered. Some customers left generous tips, while others, like Mr. Wallace, a regular who never failed to order his eggs over easy, left barely enough to cover the cost of his meal. A single mother working here. That's a tough break, he'd remarked once, shaking his head in pity. Elena met such comments with a polite smile, never letting on how deeply they affected her. She refused to let anyone's pity define her. Instead, she drew strength from the knowledge that her hard work was providing for her children. After her shift, Elena stopped by the small grocery store on Main Street to pick up essentials. She carefully counted every item in her basket, calculating the cost against her paycheck. There was no room for indulgences, only what was necessary. As she approached the checkout counter, the cashier, a young woman named Claire, smiled sympathetically. "Rough day?" Claire asked, scanning the items. Elena nodded. "Aren't they all?" she replied with a wry smile. Claire hesitated for a moment before speaking again. "You know, my mom was a single parent too. It's not easy, but she always said the tough days made her stronger." The comment caught Elena off guard, and for a moment she felt a connection with Claire. "Thank you," she said sincerely. "That means a lot." As she walked home, groceries in hand, Elena thought about Claire's words. She'd never considered herself particularly strong. She simply did what needed to be done. But perhaps there was strength in that, in showing up every day and doing the best she could. That evening, as Elena prepared dinner, Jordan and Lila sat at the kitchen table doing their homework. The soft murmur of their voices filled the room, a comforting reminder of why she worked so hard. She watched them with a mix of pride and determination. Jordan was smart and thoughtful, often helping Lila with her math problems. Lila, with her boundless energy and curiosity, reminded Elena of herself at that age. "Mom, do you think I could join the soccer team this year?" Lila asked suddenly, looking up from her workbook. Elena hesitated. The cost of uniforms and registration fees flashed through her mind. "We'll see, sweetheart," she said, not wanting to make a promise she couldn't keep. Jordan chimed in. "Maybe I can help with the fees. I could mow lawns or do odd jobs around the neighborhood." Elena's heart swelled with gratitude and sadness. "That's very thoughtful, Jordan. We'll figure something out," she said, ruffling his hair. As they ate dinner together, Elena made a silent vow. She would find a way to give her children the opportunities they deserved, no matter what it took. Their dreams would not be limited by her circumstances. They were her driving force, her reason for everything. Later that night, as the house settled into silence, Elena sat by the window with a cup of tea. The moonlight cast a soft glow over the street outside, and she found herself thinking about her journey. It wasn't easy, but it was hers. Every step she took, every sacrifice she made, was a testament to her love for her children. She didn't need recognition or praise. All she needed was the strength to keep going. And as she sat there, she realized that strength was something she had in abundance. The town of Meadowbrook awoke each morning in a haze of soft light and dewy stillness. Mayor Robert Hayes, a man of steady routines and quiet contemplation, began his day earlier than most. His morning drives through the town's quiet streets had long been a source of solace, a ritual that kept him connected to the lives of the people he served. It was during these drives that he first noticed Elena Harper. Every morning, as Robert's car hummed along the winding roads, he would see her, a lone figure cutting through the misty dawn. Elena moved with purpose, her worn sneakers striking the pavement in a rhythm that mirrored the weight she carried. Her head was held high, but Robert could see the determinations etched into her every step. For reasons he couldn't yet articulate, her image lingered in his mind long after he'd passed her by. Robert often found himself reflecting on her as he sat in his office at Town Hall, sipping coffee and reviewing the day's agenda. There was something deeply familiar about her resilience, a quiet strength that reminded him of his own mother. Clara Hayes had been a single parent too, working endless hours in a textile factory to ensure her son had a chance at a better life. It was a memory that had shaped Robert's path, instilling in him a sense of responsibility to help others who bore similar burdens. But how could he help someone like Elena without overstepping? The question gnawed at him as the days turned into weeks. He'd spent years navigating the delicate balance between leadership and intrusion, and he knew that pride was often the armor of those who had been forced to stand alone. The last thing he wanted was to make her feel exposed or indebted. One frosty morning, Robert's opportunity to act presented itself. As his car rounded the corner near the town square, he saw Elena walking briskly along the side of the road. The icy air turned her breath into visible puffs, and she clutched her thin coat tightly around her. Robert's car slowed almost instinctively, and he rolled down the window. "Good morning," he called out, his voice warm but cautious. Elena glanced over, her expression a mix of surprise and guardedness. "Morning, Mayor Hayes," she replied, her tone polite but distant. "It's bitter out today," he continued, trying to gauge her mood. "Would you like a ride? It's no trouble." Elena hesitated, her steps faltering slightly. She looked at the car, then back at him, her eyes narrowing as if searching for any hidden motives. "Thank you, but I'm fine," she said firmly. "I've got my route down to a science." Robert nodded, respecting her decision. "Well, if you ever change your mind, just flag me down," he said. "Stay warm out there." Elena offered a tight smile and resumed her walk, leaving Robert to watch her retreating figure with a mix of admiration and frustration. It wasn't much, but the brief exchange had given him a glimpse of her determination and her walls. He knew he'd have to find another way to reach her. Back at Town Hall, Robert couldn't shake the encounter from his mind. He called in his assistant, Grace Bennett, a sharp and empathetic woman who had become his confidant over the years. "Grace, do you know much about Elena Harper?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. Grace nodded thoughtfully. "She's one of the waitresses at Benny's Diner, a hard worker by all accounts. She's raising 2 kids on her own, Jordan and Lila." "Why do you ask?" Robert hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "I see her every morning during my drives. She's walking miles in this weather to get to work. It's—" He trailed off, searching for the right sentiment. "It's remarkable, but it's also troubling. I want to help her, but I'm not sure how." Grace's expression softened. "She's proud. That much is clear. If you want to help, you'll have to be subtle about it." Robert nodded, mulling over her advice. Subtlety wasn't his strong suit, but he was willing to try. That evening, Robert found himself wandering the aisles of the local department store. He picked up a sturdy pair of winter boots the kind that could withstand Meadowbrook's harshest mornings. They were practical, unassuming, and durable, just like Elena. He left them on her doorstep the next morning, along with a simple note, for the miles ahead. When Elena discovered the boots later that day, her initial reaction was one of suspicion. She scanned the street, half expecting someone to step forward and claim credit. But no one did. The note offered no clues, and after some deliberation, she decided to keep them. Her children were thrilled, urging her to try them on. The boots fit perfectly, and as she laced them up, a small smile crept onto her face. Meanwhile, Robert felt a quiet satisfaction as he continued his morning drives. He noticed the new boots on Elena's feet and the slightly quicker pace of her walk. It wasn't much, but it was a start. In the weeks that followed, Robert's admiration for Elena grew. He began to see her not just as a figure of resilience, but as a symbol of the town's untapped potential for kindness and connection. Her quiet strength spoke volumes, and he felt a growing conviction that her story deserved to be known, not as an object of pity, but as a source of inspiration. As winter deepened and the streets of Meadowbrook grew colder, Robert made a silent promise to himself. He would find a way to honor Elena's journey, and in doing so, he hoped to rekindle the spirit of compassion that Meadowbrook so desperately needed. The chapter closes with Robert sitting in his office late at night, scribbling ideas for a community initiative that could make a difference. The sound of the wind outside reminds him of Elena's solitary walks, fueling his determination to act. He doesn't yet know how the town will react, but he's willing to take the risk. For Elena, for Meadowbrook, and for the legacy his mother left behind. The morning air was unusually cold, carrying with it a sharp breeze that cut through the streets of Meadowbrook. Elena Harper tightened her scarf around her neck as she stepped out into the dim light of dawn, ready to begin her daily 10-mile trek to the diner. Her worn sneakers crunched against the frosted pavement, and each step reminded her of the weight she carried, not just her bag, but the hopes and dreams of her children, Jordan and Lila. Despite the chill, she kept her head high, her determination a quiet, yet powerful resistance against the odds stacked against her. On this particular morning, however, someone else was up early, watching. From the warmth of his car, Mayor Robert Hayes observed her from across the street. He'd passed Elena countless times on his morning drives, but today something compelled him to stop. The resolve in her stride, the way she carried herself despite the weight of her circumstances, struck him deeply. As the mayor of Meadowbrook, he'd always prided himself on knowing the people of his town, but Elena's resilience had revealed a story he could no longer ignore. Robert Hayes wasn't a stranger to struggle. His own mother had raised him alone after his father's untimely death, and the echoes of her sacrifices still shaped his understanding of perseverance and community. He saw pieces of his mother in Elena, the quiet strength, the selflessness, and the unwillingness to ask for help, even when it was needed most. He knew he had to act. But how? He feared that offering his assistance might come across as pity rather than respect, and the last thing he wanted was to diminish Elena's dignity. That morning, Hayes decided on a simple gesture. He would wait for her at the corner where their paths often crossed. Elena was halfway through her walk when she noticed a familiar car parked at the corner. As she approached, the mayor stepped out, his breath visible in the icy air. She hesitated, unsure of why he was there, but continued walking. "Good morning, Miss Harper," Hayes greeted, his voice warm but cautious. "I see you out here every morning. Do you need a ride today?" Elena's brows furrowed, her steps slowing. She felt a mix of surprise and unease. The mayor himself was offering her a ride. What would people think? "Thank you, Mr. Hayes, but I'm fine," she replied, her tone polite but firm. I've managed this long on my own. Hayes nodded, respecting her response. I understand, he said, stepping back toward his car. But if you ever change your mind, the offer stands. You're doing more than most people could ever imagine, and I just wanted to help. As he drove away, Elena's thoughts lingered on his words. It wasn't pity she'd heard in his voice. It was something deeper, almost like admiration. Still, her pride wouldn't allow her to accept his help. She'd built her life around self-reliance, and she wasn't about to let that change. The following morning, Elena opened her front door to find a neatly wrapped package on her porch. Inside were a pair of sturdy winter boots, perfectly sized for her. Tucked into the box was a handwritten note. For the miles you walk and the strength you carry. R.H.E. Elena stared at the boots for a long moment, her emotions a whirlwind of gratitude, embarrassment, and hesitation. She knew exactly who had left them, and though she wanted to refuse the gift, her children had other plans. Mom, look at these boots. They're perfect for you, Jordan exclaimed, holding them up with wide eyes. Leela, her youngest, clapped her hands together. Now you won't be so cold, Mommy. Elena smiled despite herself, the warmth in her children's excitement melting some of her resistance. They are nice, she admitted quietly, slipping them on. The fit was perfect, and the thick soles felt like a blessing against the icy ground. She decided she'd keep them, not for herself, but because her children's joy was worth more than her pride. Across town, Hayes sat in his office, wondering if Elena had accepted the boots. He'd acted on impulse, driven by a need to show her that someone cared, but he feared he'd overstepped. He didn't want to undermine her independence, yet he also knew the power of a small gesture. You're thinking about her again, aren't you? His assistant, Margaret, asked as she entered the room with a stack of papers. Hayes leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. I see so much strength in her. She reminds me of my mom, but I don't want her to feel like a charity case. Margaret set the papers down and crossed her arms. Sometimes, Mr. Mayor, people need to know they're not alone. It's not about charity, it's about community. And if anyone understands that, it's you. Her words resonated, and Hayes resolved to continue finding ways to support Elena, even if it meant treading carefully. He'd learned that true kindness wasn't about grand gestures, but about meeting people where they were and respecting their journey. As the days passed, Elena found herself reflecting on the boots and the mayor's words. She'd never asked for help, yet it had found her anyway. Her pride was a shield she'd carried for years, protecting her from the judgment of others. But now she wondered if accepting kindness was a weakness or a strength. One evening, as she watched Jordan and Lila do their homework, by the dim light of their kitchen, she thought about what kind of example she wanted to set for them. She wanted them to see her as strong, yes, but also as someone who wasn't afraid to let others in. Maybe, just maybe, there was strength in allowing herself to be vulnerable. 1 week later, as Hayes prepared to leave his office for the day, he found a small envelope on his desk. Inside was a simple thank you note from Elena. The boots made all the difference. Thank you. EOH double quote. Hayes smiled, his heart lighter than it had been in days. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He folded the note carefully and tucked it into his desk drawer, knowing that this was only the beginning of a journey they were both destined to share. Little did they know, their paths were about to intertwine in ways neither of them could have imagined, setting the stage for a ripple effect of kindness that would transform not only their lives, but the entire town of Meadowbrook. The early morning light filtered through the lace curtains of the mayor's office as Robert Hayes sat at his desk, his thoughts restless. His daily encounters with Elena Harper had transformed from a casual observation into a cause for reflection. While his simple gesture of leaving boots at her doorstep had been well-intentioned, it had sparked conversations in Meadowbrook, conversations that revealed the subtle divisions running through the small town. At the local cafe, a group of townsfolk gathered over their morning coffee, their voices low but pointed. "Did you hear about Elena Harper?" one woman whispered. "First, she's walking everywhere, and now the mayor's leaving gifts on her porch. Must be nice." "You think she's doing it for attention?" another chimed in, stirring her cup absently. "It's just strange. Why doesn't she take the bus like everyone else?" Not everyone shared the same sentiment, however. At a nearby table, a young man named Caleb, one of Elena's neighbors, couldn't contain his irritation. "Do you even know her?" he said sharply. "She's not looking for a handout. She's just trying to take care of her kids." The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken biases. While Caleb's defense was heartfelt, it highlighted the invisible barriers that separated Elena from many of her neighbors. To some, she was an outsider, a reminder of hardships they preferred to ignore. To others, she was a symbol of resilience. But the whispered judgments carried a sting that cut deeper than Elena would ever admit. At the diner, Elena's shifts were grueling but routine. She poured coffee, took orders, and cleaned tables, all while keeping a polite smile on her face. Yet even here, she felt the weight of silent prejudice. "Can I get some service over here?" a gruff voice barked from a corner booth. The man, a regular customer, often directed his frustration at Elena, his tone sharper with her than with her colleagues. She approached with her usual composure, but the slight hesitation in her step betrayed her unease. "Of course, sir," she said evenly, jotting down his order. As she turned to leave, she overheard his muttered words. "Why the mayor's wasting his time on her? I'll never understand." The remark lingered in Elena's mind, even as she busied herself with other tasks. She had grown used to such comments, but they always left a mark. The sting wasn't in the words themselves, but in the quiet agreement she sensed from others around her. It was a reminder of the uphill battle she faced, not just as a single mother, but as a woman trying to hold her head high in a town that wasn't always kind. Back in his office, Hayes's assistant, Margaret, entered with a stack of papers. She paused when she saw the mayor deep in thought, staring out the window toward the town square. "Penny for your thoughts?" Margaret ventured, setting the papers on his desk. Hayes sighed. "It's about Elena." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "The woman with the boots?" "The woman who walks 10 miles to work every day," Hayes corrected gently. "She's become a topic of conversation, hasn't she?" Margaret hesitated. "People are talking, yes. Some see what you did as favoritism." Hayes frowned. Favoritism? Helping someone in need shouldn't be seen that way." "I know," Margaret said, her tone careful. "But you know how this town can be. They don't always see the full picture. Maybe it's time to address it more openly." Hayes considered her words. He had always believed in leading by example, but he was beginning to realize that quiet gestures might not be enough to change minds. If he wanted to support Elena and others like her, he would need to tackle the prejudices that held Meadowbrook back. That evening, Hayes stopped by Elena's house, his presence a surprise to her. She opened the door cautiously, her children peeking out from behind her. "Mayor Hayes," she greeted, her voice tinged with both curiosity and wariness. "Elena," he began, offering a warm smile. "I wanted to check in. I've been hearing some things around town, and I want to make sure you're doing okay." Elena's brow furrowed. "I'm fine," she said, her tone measured. "Why wouldn't I be?" Hayes hesitated, then decided to be direct. because not everyone in this town understands what you're going through. And I know that some of the comments being made, they're not fair." Elena's shoulders stiffened. "I'm used to it," she said quietly. "You shouldn't have to be," Hayes replied firmly. "People need to see you for who you are, not who they think you are. And I want to help make that happen." Elena met his gaze, her expression unreadable. After a moment, she nodded slightly. "Thank you. But I've learned that change doesn't come easy." "No, it doesn't," Hayes agreed. "But it starts with people like you." The next day, Hayes gathered his staff to discuss a new initiative. He proposed a community forum, a chance for residents to come together and share their stories, fostering understanding and empathy. "If we want Meadowbrook to be better," Hayes told them, "we need to start breaking down these invisible barriers, and that means giving people like Elena a voice." The staff's reactions were mixed, but Margaret voiced her support. "It's ambitious," she said, "but it might just work." As plans for the forum took shape, word spread throughout the town. Some residents were skeptical, while others were curious. For Elena, the prospect of sharing her story publicly was daunting, but Hayes's unwavering belief in her gave her the courage to consider it. Meanwhile, small but meaningful changes began to take root in Meadowbrook. Caleb, the young man from the cafe, started organizing a donation drive for struggling families, inspired by Hayes's example. At the diner, a regular customer left a generous tip for Elena, with a note that simply read, "Thank you for your hard work." Though the whispers of judgment hadn't disappeared entirely, the seeds of compassion were beginning to grow. And for the first time in a long time, Elena felt a glimmer of hope. Hope that her quiet strength might be enough to bridge the divides in her community. The chill of winter gripped Meadowbrook tightly, frosting the edges of windows and leaving the streets covered in a thin, crunching layer of ice. The bite of the cold seemed to deepen Elena Harper's struggle. Each morning, her journey to the diner felt like an uphill battle against both nature and her own exhaustion. But amid the frost and the harsh whispers of the town's skepticism, small gestures of kindness began to surface, marking the beginning of a change no one could have predicted. Mayor Robert Hayes sat at his desk, gazing out the frost-covered window of the town hall. His thoughts were on Elena, her solitary figure etched into his memory, a figure of resilience and quiet defiance. He had seen her push through the biting winds each morning, her head high, despite the weight of her burdens. It had stirred something in him, a sense of duty, not as a politician, but as a fellow human being. Determined to act, Hayes began with something simple. The idea of a community meeting formed in his mind, one where he could address the values of unity and kindness without singling anyone out. He envisioned the meeting as a platform for change, an opportunity to foster empathy and nudge the townsfolk toward compassion. The Meadowbrook Community Hall buzzed with activity. The townsfolk filed in, their expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism. Hayes stood at the front, his usually commanding presence softened by a quiet determination. The warmth in his voice as he began to speak captured their attention. "In this town, we've always prided ourselves on being a community that looks out for one another. But in recent times, I've noticed something slipping away. The threads of compassion that bind us." Without mentioning names, he wove a tale of resilience, describing someone who, despite facing immense hardship, had never faltered in their commitment to their family and community. He spoke about how small acts of kindness could ripple outward, touching lives in ways that were profound and transformative. As he concluded, the hall was silent. For a moment, it seemed as though the town's collective heart had paused, considering his words. Then, a scattered applause grew into a full roar, signaling their approval. The first seed of change had been planted. Elena returned home one evening to find a surprise on her doorstep. A brown paper bag, neatly tied with twine, sat waiting for her. Inside, she found school supplies for Jordan and Lila, notebooks, colored pencils, and even a set of gloves. There was no note, only a small sticker that read, "With love from your community." She clutched the bag to her chest, her emotions a mix of gratitude and hesitation. The kids squealed with delight as they rummaged through the contents, oblivious to the conflict warring in their mother's mind. Accepting these gifts felt like letting her guard down, but the joy on her children's faces made her question whether pride was worth denying their happiness. The anonymous gesture inspired others. Over the following weeks, Elena found more small acts of kindness peppering her days. One morning, a neighbor left freshly baked bread on her windowsill. Another day, an envelope with a small gift card to the local grocery store appeared in her mailbox. These acts were simple but impactful, each one a testament to the community's growing warmth. For Hayes, these acts of kindness validated his belief in Meadowbrook's potential for change. He decided to take it a step further by organizing a charity drive, encouraging the townsfolk to donate winter supplies for struggling families. The response was overwhelming. Coats, scarves, and boots poured in, creating a pile so large it overflowed the collection bins at the town hall. Elena's reluctance to embrace the support began to thaw one particularly frigid morning. As she trudged toward the diner, her feet aching and her breath forming clouds in the icy air, she heard a car horn behind her. Turning, she saw Hayes pulling up beside her, the passenger window rolling down. "Elena," he called, his voice warm but firm. "It's too cold for walking. Please, let me give you a ride." For a moment she hesitated, her instincts screaming to refuse. But then she saw the sincerity in his eyes, not pity but respect, and she nodded. Sliding into the car, she felt the warmth envelop her, not just from the heater, but from Hayes's steady presence. "Thank you," she said quietly, staring out the window as the streets of Meadowbrook blurred past. "I'm not used to this." "You deserve it, Elena," he replied. "Sometimes, accepting kindness is as brave as giving it." Word of Hayes' gesture spread quickly, igniting mixed reactions. Some applauded his actions, while others whispered about favoritism. At the diner, Elena faced lingering stares from certain customers, their judgment thinly veiled. But alongside the judgment came moments of support. A regular customer, an elderly man named Mr. Caldwell, left a generous tip one day with a note scribbled on the receipt. "You're doing great. Keep going." Elena's heart swelled. For every cold glance, there was now a warm smile to balance it. Slowly but surely, the kindness extended to her began to eclipse the judgment. As winter progressed, the spirit of generosity spread through Meadowbrook like wildfire. Inspired by Hayes and Elena's story, local businesses began offering discounts to families in need. Schools organized coat drives, and the church opened its doors for weekly meals, inviting everyone to share in the warmth of fellowship. Elena found herself at the center of it all, not as a charity case, but as a symbol of resilience. She started volunteering at the church, helping to distribute food and supplies. Her actions inspired others, showing that even in the face of hardship, one could still contribute to the community. One evening, as Elena walked home with her children, she noticed a group of neighbors waving to her. Their smiles were genuine, their greetings warm. It was a stark contrast to the indifferent glances she had grown accustomed to. For the first time in years, she felt something she hadn't dared to hope for, a sense of belonging. In her heart, Elena knew the journey wasn't over. Prejudices didn't vanish overnight, and challenges still loomed. But as she tucked her children into bed that night, she felt a glimmer of hope. The town of Meadowbrook was changing, and so was she. The acts of kindness that had started as a ripple were now a wave, carrying the town toward a future where compassion outweighed judgment. And at the center of it all was Elena, quietly teaching Meadowbrook the true power of resilience and community. Elena Harper had thought the initial wave of kindness was the peak of her unexpected journey through Meadowbrook's tangled web of prejudice and compassion. But as the snow began to thaw, exposing the muddy streets beneath, she discovered that kindness, much like the frost, could leave behind lingering traces of discomfort and resistance. The townsfolk were talking. At the diner, in the narrow aisles of the local grocery store, and even outside the church, Elena's name surfaced in hushed conversations. Initially, the murmurs had been sympathetic. She's been through so much. But sympathy had a short shelf life in Meadowbrook. Soon the whispers turned sharp. Why does she deserve all this attention? What about the others who were struggling? Elena overheard snippets of these remarks, the words pricking her heart like icy needles. Her morning walk to the diner, once accompanied by growing smiles and gestures of warmth, now felt colder. She noticed a neighbor's curtains twitch as she passed by and heard the subtle clearing of throats that seemed to punctuate her every step. She clutched her scarf tighter, trying to shield herself from more than just the biting wind. One afternoon, as Elena prepared to leave her shift, Mrs. Greer, a longtime Meadowbrook resident, lingered by the counter. Her expression, a mixture of curiosity and judgment, made Elena's stomach churn. "Elena," Mrs. Greer began, her tone overly sweet, "I've been meaning to ask, do you think it's fair that you're getting all this special treatment? I mean, there are plenty of folks here who could use a little help, too." The words hit Elena harder than she expected. She stammered out a polite response, but her mind swirled with doubt. Was she truly deserving of everything the community had offered? The repaired car, the gifts for her children, the kind gestures, had it all come at the expense of others who were equally in need? Meanwhile, Mayor Robert Hayes was facing his own share of resistance. At a town council meeting, a local businessman, Mr. Langley, voiced his concerns. "Mayor Hayes, while we all appreciate acts of goodwill, we must ensure that they're evenly distributed. Focusing on one person, it sends the wrong message." Hayes's jaw tightened, but he maintained his calm. "This isn't about singling anyone out," he replied. "It's about recognizing resilience and inspiring others to act. The kindness we show to one person creates a ripple effect that benefits us all." The room fell silent. While some nodded in agreement, others exchanged skeptical glances. Hayes realized that changing hearts and minds was proving to be a steeper climb than he'd anticipated. Elena's doubt reached its peak one evening as she walked home from the diner. Her repaired car, a symbol of the community's generosity, sat unused in the driveway. She couldn't bring herself to drive it, fearing it would draw even more scrutiny. As she trudged through the slush, headlights appeared behind her. She turned to see Hayes' car pull up beside her. "Elena, can I give you a lift?" he asked, his voice gentle. She hesitated but finally nodded, slipping into the passenger seat. The warmth of the heater was a stark contrast to the chill in her heart. "It's been hard," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "Sometimes it feels like every kind gesture comes with a shadow of judgment." Hayes nodded, his expression thoughtful. "When my mother raised me on her own, she faced the same thing," he said. "People judged her for accepting help, but she taught me something important. Accepting kindness isn't weakness, it's a strength. It shows you're willing to keep going, no matter what others think." Elena looked at him, his words sparking a flicker of hope. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps accepting kindness was not about deserving it, but about recognizing the humanity in others' generosity. Back home, Jordan and Lila were busy with their homework when Elena walked in. She leaned against the doorway watching them. They were the reason she endured everything. Their laughter, their dreams, they made every whisper and judgment worth it. Mom. Jordan looked up, his brow furrowed. Why do people have to be so mean sometimes? Elena's heart ached at his question. Not everyone understands, she said softly. But kindness always matters, even when it's hard. Remember that, okay? Jordan nodded, his expression resolute. I will, Mom. That night, Elena stood before the small mirror in her bedroom. She stared at her reflection, the lines of exhaustion etched into her face. But beyond the tired eyes, she saw something else, strength. The strength of a mother who had walked miles to provide for her children, who had faced judgment and kept going. You're not done yet, she whispered to herself, her voice firm. There's more to do. The next day, Elena did something she hadn't done before. She drove her repaired car to work. As she parked in front of the diner, she noticed Mrs. Greer watching from across the street. Elena met her gaze and offered a small, polite nod before walking inside. The whispers didn't stop overnight. Judgment lingered, but so did kindness. For every Mrs. Greer, there was a Mr. Caldwell, leaving another encouraging note. For every skeptical glance, there was a neighbor's warm smile. And for Elena, that was enough. Enough to keep walking, enough to keep accepting kindness, and enough to begin giving it back. Meadowbrook's story was still unfolding, its pages filled with both resistance and reflection. But through it all, Elena Harper remained at its heart, quietly teaching the town and herself that resilience and kindness could outlast even the harshest winter. The frosty winds of Meadowbrook swirled with more than just the chill of winter. Beneath the surface of its quaint streets and cozy homes, a quiet storm brewed. What began as a town united in small acts of kindness now faced a schism. As the support for Elena Harper grew, so too did the voices of doubt, skepticism, and resentment. Meadowbrook, once celebrated for its harmony, was now a town split by its own generosity. It began subtly, like the first snowflakes before a storm. Gossip spread in whispers, behind closed doors, and over steaming cups of coffee at the local diner. Some townsfolk questioned the attention Elena was receiving, their skepticism tinged with jealousy or misunderstanding. Why her? A man at the hardware store asked his neighbor. There are plenty of struggling families around here. Why does she get all the help? Similar sentiments echoed through the town. At the school gates, mothers chatted in hushed tones, casting glances at Jordan and Lila. The children, once invisible to their peers, now found themselves caught in a web of quiet judgment. Elena felt the shift too, though the warm smiles and kind gestures from many still brought her hope. The judgmental stares and cold shoulders from others began to weigh heavily. At the diner, some regulars left smaller tips, their usual chatter replaced with silence. Others made pointed comments about earning your keep that cut deeper than they realized. The growing divide came to a head during a town hall meeting. Mayor Robert Hayes, ever attuned to the pulse of Meadowbrook, called the gathering to address the growing unrest. The community center overflowed with residents, their voices buzzing with anticipation and tension. Hayes took the stage, his expression a blend of calm authority and quiet determination. Meadowbrook has always been a town where we look out for one another, he began, but I've noticed something troubling. Our kindness is being overshadowed by doubt, by division. This is not who we are. A murmur rippled through the crowd. One man stood, his voice sharp. It's easy for you to say, Mayor. But how is it fair that one person gets so much while others get nothing? Before Hayes could respond, another voice interjected. It's not about fairness. It's about doing what's right. Elena's story moved us because she represents the strength and resilience we all admire. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices, some defending Elena, others voicing their frustrations. Hayes raised his hand, commanding silence. This isn't about choosing sides, he said firmly. It's about recognizing the power of community. When one of us struggles, we all have a duty to help. At home, Elena watched the town's turmoil with a heavy heart. She hadn't asked for this attention, hadn't sought to become the center of Meadowbrook's division. Her only focus had always been her children. Sitting at the kitchen table late one night, she confided in her closest friend, Marcy. Maybe it would have been better if no one had noticed, Elena said, her voice trembling. I didn't mean to cause all this trouble. Marcy reached across the table, gripping Elena's hand tightly. This isn't your fault. The kindness you've received isn't a privilege, Elena. It's what you've earned through your strength. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of that. Despite Marcy's reassurances, Elena couldn't shake the feeling of guilt. She thought about leaving Meadowbrook, starting fresh somewhere else. But as she looked at Jordan and Lila, asleep in their beds, she knew she couldn't uproot their lives. They deserved stability, a chance to thrive in the community she had fought so hard to belong to. As the town's divide deepened, a group of Elena's supporters rallied together. Led by Hayes and a few compassionate neighbors, they organized a gathering at the church. The event was meant to remind the town of its shared values and to celebrate resilience in the face of adversity. One by one, residents shared stories of how Elena's journey had inspired them. An elderly woman spoke of her own struggles as a young widow. A teacher shared how Jordan's determination in class reminded her of the strength Elena embodied. Their words painted a picture of a woman whose quiet perseverance had touched more lives than she realized. Elena sat quietly in the back, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in weeks, she felt a flicker of hope. The kindness she had received wasn't just about her. It was about the values the town wanted to uphold. In the days following the gathering, Elena made a decision. She would not leave Meadowbrook. Instead, she would face the division head-on, not with defiance, but with the same quiet strength that had carried her through life's hardest moments. She began volunteering more actively, joining efforts at the local food bank and helping organize the charity drive Hayes had spearheaded. Her actions spoke louder than words, slowly shifting perceptions. Even some of her detractors began to see her not as a burden, but as a beacon of resilience. Hayes, ever the unifier, took additional steps to heal the rift in Meadowbrook. He hosted a series of community workshops, inviting residents to discuss their concerns openly. These sessions became a space for understanding, where prejudices were challenged and empathy began to take root. Elena was invited to speak at one such workshop. Nervous but resolute, she stood before the group and shared her story, not as a plea for sympathy, but as a testament to the power of perseverance. Her words were met with silence, then applause. In that moment, the walls between her and her neighbors began to crumble. By the end of winter, Meadowbrook was no longer the divided town it had been. The acts of kindness that had sparked controversy now became a source of pride. The community's unity was restored, stronger than before. Elena's journey continued, but she no longer walked it alone. Her neighbors, once divided by doubt, now walked beside her, their support unwavering. And as the first blossoms of spring appeared, so too did the promise of a brighter, kinder Meadowbrook. In the face of division, Elena and the town discovered the true meaning of community, standing together, even when it's easier to stand apart. and in their unity, they found strength not only to heal, but to grow, creating a legacy of compassion that would guide Meadowbrook for generations to come. The warm glow of the Meadowbrook Community Center's lights cut through the crisp autumn evening, drawing townspeople to its doors. Mayor Robert Hayes stood near the podium, his heart pounding in anticipation. Tonight wasn't just another town event. It was a pivotal moment, one he hoped would bring understanding and unity. Unbeknownst to Elena Harper, she was about to become the heart of a story that would change her life and Meadowbrook forever. The center buzzed with conversation as residents filled the room. Elena sat near the back, Jordan and Lila by her side. She had hesitated to attend, unsure of what awaited her. The kids, however, were excited, their chatter brightening her otherwise apprehensive mood. "Mom, look, there's Mayor Hayes," Jordan whispered, pointing toward the front. Elena nodded, her gaze lingering on the mayor. She still couldn't fully understand why he had taken such an interest in her struggles. The thought both comforted and unsettled her. Hayes took the stage, his voice calm yet resolute, as he addressed the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight. Meadowbrook is a place we cherish, but like any community, we face challenges. Tonight, I want to share a story about resilience, kindness, and what it means to truly be a neighbor." The room quieted as Hayes began recounting the tale of a single mother who had walked miles every day to provide for her children. He spoke of her unyielding determination, her quiet strength, and the sacrifices she made without complaint. "This woman embodies the spirit of Meadowbrook," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Her story is not just hers. It's a reminder of what we can achieve together when we choose compassion over judgment." As Hayes spoke, Elena felt a growing realization settle over her. This was her story. Her cheeks flushed, and she lowered her head, hoping to remain unnoticed. But as Hayes's words reached their conclusion, he turned his gaze toward her. "Elena Harper," he called softly, "would you join me up here?" Gasps rippled through the audience. All eyes turned to Elena, whose heart pounded as she reluctantly rose from her seat. Jordan squeezed her hand, his young face full of pride. Elena walked to the stage, each step feeling heavier than the last. When she finally stood beside Hayes, the warmth in his smile steadied her nerves. He handed her the microphone, his voice encouraging. "You don't have to say much," he whispered. "Just share what's in your heart." Elena hesitated, then looked out at the sea of faces. Some were familiar, others less so, but all were watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. Taking a deep breath, she began to speak. "I never expected anyone to notice my struggles," she said, her voice trembling. "Like many of you, I've just been trying to do my best for my family. But over the past few months, I've learned something important. We don't have to carry our burdens alone. This town, all of you have shown me that kindness can change everything." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, a thunderous applause erupted, the room filling with a sound of clapping and cheers. Tears welled in Elena's eyes as she glanced at Hayes, whose expression mirrored the pride radiating from the crowd. The days following the event marked a turning point for both Elena and Meadowbrook. Conversations in the diner shifted from judgmental whispers to words of encouragement. Customers who had once avoided her now greeted her warmly, some even leaving generous tips and kind notes. At the local school, Jordan's teacher approached Elena during a parent-teacher conference. "Your son is remarkable," she said, her tone sincere. "His essay about resilience brought me to tears. You're raising wonderful children." Elena's heart swelled with pride and gratitude. For the first time in years, she felt seen. not just as a struggling mother, but as a person of worth and dignity. Despite the progress, not everyone in Meadowbrook embraced the change. A small but vocal group of residents began to grumble about the attention Elena was receiving. At the grocery store, she overheard a woman mutter, "Why is she so special?" Plenty of people struggle. The words stung, but Elena refused to let them overshadow the kindness she had experienced. Hayes, too, faced criticism, with some accusing him of favoritism. Robert, his assistant, warned during a private meeting, "This could hurt your standing with certain voters." Hayes sighed, his resolve unshaken. "If helping someone in need damages my reputation, then so be it. This isn't about politics, it's about doing what's right." Inspired by the town's growing interest in Elena's journey, Hayes decided to organize a storytelling event at the community center. He invited residents to share their own experiences of struggle and resilience, hoping to foster a deeper understanding among neighbors. The event drew a diverse crowd, each story adding a new layer to Meadowbrook's collective narrative. An elderly widower spoke of his loneliness after losing his wife. A young teacher shared her challenges with student debt, and a teenage athlete revealed the pressures of living up to expectations. When it was Elena's turn to speak, she felt a wave of nervousness, but also a deep sense of purpose. "We all have struggles," she began, "but what matters is how we face them. And sometimes facing them means accepting help and giving it in return." Her words resonated, sparking conversations that continued long after the event ended. As the weeks passed, Meadowbrook began to transform. The ripple effect of kindness spread beyond Elena's story. Local businesses partnered with the mayor's office to create initiatives supporting families in need. Schools started programs promoting empathy and community service, inspired by Jordan's essay. Elena found herself at the center of these efforts, not as a recipient of charity, but as a leader. She volunteered at food drives, mentored other struggling parents, and became a symbol of resilience and hope. One evening, as she walked home from a community meeting, Jordan and Lila skipping beside her, she paused to look around. The streetlights cast a warm glow over the familiar streets, and for the first time, they didn't feel cold or lonely. Meadowbrook was no longer just a town. It was her home. Standing in her small living room that night, Elena reflected on how far she had come. The woman who once walked miles in the cold, weighed down by exhaustion and isolation, was now part of something greater. Her journey had not only transformed her life, but had also brought a community together. As she tucked her children into bed, she whispered a quiet promise to herself, to continue spreading the kindness that had lifted her up, and to ensure that no one in Meadowbrook ever felt alone again. And so, the turning point wasn't just a moment. It was the start of a movement, one that would ripple through Meadowbrook for generations to come. The first rays of spring sunlight filtered through the windows of Meadowbrook High School's gymnasium, where rows of folding chairs filled the expanse of the polished floor. The air buzzed with anticipation as families, friends, and community members gathered to celebrate a pivotal moment for the town: the high school graduation of the class of 2023. But this year, the event carried an added layer of emotion, as it marked a milestone not just for the students, but for the community itself. At the heart of this celebration was Elena Harper, sitting quietly among the other parents. Her son, Jordan, would soon walk across the stage to receive his diploma, a moment that seemed almost surreal after the years of struggle they had endured. Beside her sat Lila, clutching Elena's hand tightly, her eyes sparkling with pride for her brother. This day was not just about Jordan. It was a culmination of the resilience, love, and newfound unity that had reshaped Meadowbrook. Elena smoothed the fabric of her dress, one of the few she owned that made her feel truly confident. She had saved it for this occasion, knowing how much it meant to both Jordan and herself. As she glanced around the packed gymnasium, she felt a pang of gratitude for the community that had rallied around her in the past year. Jordan's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. From a boy who once hid his emotions behind sarcasm and silence, he had grown into a determined and compassionate young man. Today, he was graduating with honors, his hard work and perseverance shining through. It was a moment that validated every sacrifice Elena had made. When Jordan's name was called, the room erupted in applause. Elena's heart swelled as she watched her son stride confidently across the stage, shaking hands with the principal before receiving his diploma. As he turned to face the crowd, his eyes found hers, and for a fleeting moment, the noise around them seemed to fade. They shared a look of mutual pride and understanding, a silent acknowledgement of the journey they had taken together. As the applause subsided, the principal took the podium, her voice warm and steady as she introduced the keynote speaker for the ceremony, Mayor Robert Hayes. The announcement drew a mixture of curiosity and excitement from the audience. Hayes's reputation as a transformative leader had grown significantly over the past year, much of it tied to his involvement with Elena's story and the subsequent community initiatives. Stepping up to the microphone, Hayes paused, his gaze sweeping the room. "Good afternoon, Meadowbrook," he began, his voice carrying a note of sincerity that instantly captured the audience's attention. "Today we celebrate not just the achievements of these incredible young graduates, but also the resilience, support, and unity that make our community strong." Hayes then shared a story that many in the room knew but had never heard in full detail. He spoke of Elena's tireless walks to work, her refusal to let adversity define her, and the way her quiet strength had inspired a ripple effect of kindness throughout the town. "Elena Harper taught us all that resilience isn't just about enduring hardship," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "It's about rising above it, finding strength in our community, and refusing to let circumstances dictate our worth." As he concluded, the audience rose to their feet in applause, their cheers a testament to the impact of Elena's story. Blushing and overwhelmed, Elena gave a small, grateful nod to the mayor as tears welled in her eyes. Following the ceremony, the crowd spilled out into the school's sunlit lawn. Families posed for photos, graduates tossed their caps in the air, and the atmosphere buzzed with celebration. Elena found herself at the center of a small group of well-wishers, each expressing their admiration for her strength and her children's achievements. "You've raised a remarkable young man," said Mrs. Caldwell, one of the diner's regulars, "and we're all so proud of him. And you." Amid the congratulatory buzz, Hayes approached Elena with a warm smile. "Elena," he began, "I wanted to let you know that the nonprofit we've been working on, the one focused on supporting single parents, has secured funding, and I was hoping you'd consider joining the board. Your perspective and experience would be invaluable." The offer took Elena by surprise. Her journey had always been about survival, about getting through the day-to-day challenges. The idea of stepping into a leadership role, of using her story to help others, was both daunting and exhilarating. I'd be honored," she said finally, her voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions inside her. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, painting the town in hues of gold and amber, Elena found herself standing on the front porch of their home. Jordan and Lila were inside, laughing as they flipped through old photo albums, their joy infectious. In the quiet of the evening, Elena reflected on how far they had come. The journey had been anything but easy, yet every step had been worth it. She thought of the people who had supported them. Hayes, the neighbors, the community members who had once been strangers but now felt like family. She resolved to use her new role to ensure that no one in Meadowbrook, or anywhere, ever felt as isolated as she once had. The nonprofit would be more than just a resource. It would be a lifeline, a reminder that no one had to face their struggles alone. Later that night, as they sat around the dinner table, Jordan spoke up. "Mom," he said, his voice tinged with both excitement and seriousness, "I've been thinking about everything Mayor Hayes said today, about resilience and community. I think I want to do something meaningful, like you. Maybe study social work in college." Elena's heart swelled with pride. "You'll be amazing," she said, reaching across the table to squeeze his hand. In that moment, she realized that the torch had been passed. Her children were not just witnesses to her journey. They were carrying its lessons forward, ready to create their own ripples of change. The graduation marked more than the end of a chapter for Jordan. It was a new beginning for the entire Harper family, a moment where past struggles transformed into future possibilities. As they moved forward, hand in hand, they carried with them the lessons of resilience, compassion, and the unwavering power of community. Meadowbrook's story was now their story, one they were ready to share with the world. The cool breeze of early autumn swept through Meadowbrook, rustling the amber leaves that lined the town's streets. It had been several months since Jordan's graduation, and the changes in both the Harper family and the community were palpable. Elena Harper's once quiet and solitary journey had grown into a vibrant movement of unity and compassion, inspiring others both within Meadowbrook and beyond. Elena sat at her modest desk in the newly established office of Hearts United, the nonprofit born from Mayor Hayes's initiative. The small space buzzed with energy, a stark contrast to the solitude she had once known. Volunteers moved about, organizing donation drives, scheduling counseling sessions, and brainstorming ways to expand their reach. For Elena, this was more than a job. It was a calling. Her role on the board had grown into an active leadership position, one that demanded her time and energy, but also gave her a profound sense of purpose. Each day, she worked to ensure that single parents, struggling families, and anyone in need found the support she had once so desperately sought. At the heart of the nonprofit's success was Elena's story. Her unwavering resilience had become the foundation of the organization's mission, and her presence was a source of comfort and inspiration to those they served. Meanwhile, Jordan had started his first semester at a nearby university, pursuing a degree in social work. Inspired by his mother's journey and the community that had rallied around them, he was determined to dedicate his life to helping others. One weekend, as he returned home for a visit, he shared his excitement with Elena and Lila over dinner. "We're starting a project in one of my classes," he said, his voice alight with enthusiasm. "It's all about designing community outreach programs. I think I want to model ours after Hearts United." Elena beamed with pride. "You've always had such a big heart, Jordan. I know you'll do amazing things." Lila chimed in, her eyes sparkling with ambition. "Maybe I can join you when I get to college. I want to do something meaningful too." In his final year as mayor, Robert Hayes took a moment to reflect on the transformation that had taken root in Meadowbrook. Standing in the town square, he observed the familiar bustle of neighbors greeting each other warmly, a stark contrast to the indifference that had once characterized the town. Hearts United had become a symbol of the town's newfound spirit, and Hayes took great pride in the role he had played. Yet he often credited Elena for the change, reminding anyone who would listen that her resilience had been the spark that ignited a movement. During a meeting with Elena, he shared his thoughts. You've turned your story into something so much bigger than yourself, Elena. Meadowbrook is stronger because of you. Her response was humble, as always. It's stronger because we all chose to come together, Robert. I just gave us a reason. The impact of Hearts United was felt far beyond Meadowbrook. Neighboring towns took notice of the nonprofit's success and began reaching out for advice on how to replicate its model. Elena and her team traveled to community centers and schools, sharing their story and offering guidance. One particularly moving moment came during a workshop in a nearby town. A young woman approached Elena after her presentation, her voice trembling with emotion. "I'm a single mom, too," she said. "Hearing your story makes me believe I can keep going." "Thank you." Elena held her hand, her own eyes glistening with tears. "You're stronger than you think, and you're never alone." Back in Meadowbrook, the spirit of kindness and solidarity continued to flourish. Families who had once been reluctant to engage with their neighbors now organized block parties and community events. Schools integrated lessons on empathy and inclusivity, ensuring that the next generation carried forward the values that had reshaped the town. Even those who had initially resisted the changes began to see the value in unity. One elderly resident, who had once been critical of the attention Elena received, approached her at a town gathering. "I was wrong about you," he admitted, his voice heavy with sincerity. "What you've done for this town, it's remarkable." Elena smiled, her heart full. "It's not about me. It's about all of us, coming together." Late one evening, Elena sat on the front porch of her home, a cup of tea warming her hands as she gazed up at the star-filled sky. The memories of her long walks to the diner felt like a lifetime ago. She thought of the cold mornings, the judgmental stares, and the endless worry that had once consumed her. Now, those struggles were a distant echo, replaced by a profound sense of fulfillment. She had not only survived, but had thrived, turning her pain into purpose. And as she looked toward the future, she felt a deep gratitude for the community that had lifted her up, and for the opportunity to lift others in turn. As the season turned to winter, Meadowbrook hosted a town-wide celebration to honor Hayes as he prepared to step down as mayor. The event also served as an opportunity to reflect on the town's journey and to celebrate the individuals who had made it possible. Hayes, standing on the makeshift stage in the town square, spoke with heartfelt emotion. "This town has taught me that real leadership is about listening, about seeing the strength in others and helping them shine. Elena Harper embodies that strength, and I have no doubt she'll continue to inspire us all." The crowd erupted in applause as Elena joined him on stage, her cheeks flushed with humility. Looking out at the sea of faces, some familiar, some new, she felt a profound sense of belonging. "I never imagined I'd be standing here," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But this isn't just my story. It's ours. It's proof that when we choose kindness, we can create something truly extraordinary." In the years that followed, Meadowbrook became a model of compassion and community for towns across the country. Hearts United expanded its reach, offering support to countless families and inspiring similar initiatives nationwide. Elena's children carried forward her legacy, each finding their own ways to contribute to the world. Jordan became a social worker, advocating for underprivileged families, while Lila pursued a career in education, determined to nurture empathy in young minds. And as for Elena, she continued to lead with grace and humility, her heart full of gratitude for the journey that had brought her here. Meadowbrook's transformation was more than just a story of resilience. It was a testament to the power of community, compassion, and the enduring impact of a single act of kindness. And at its heart was Elena Harper, a woman who had turned her quiet struggle into a legacy of change that would inspire generations to come. The winter sun hung low in the sky, casting a golden glow over the snow-covered streets of Meadowbrook. It had been over a year since the inception of Hearts United, and the transformation within the community was undeniable. What had started as a modest non-profit organization now reverberated far beyond the town, creating ripples of change that reached neighboring cities and even inspired national conversations about resilience and compassion. Elena Harper stood at the front of a bustling community center, her hands resting gently on the podium as she looked out at a packed room. Families, volunteers, and town leaders had gathered for the monthly Hearts United Progress meeting. Though the air was crisp with the chill of December, the warmth inside the room was palpable. When we began this journey, Elena started, her voice steady and heartfelt. I never imagined how far it could take us. Hearts United was born from a single idea, that no one should face their challenges alone. What we've built together is more than a program. It's a lifeline, a testament to what happens when a community comes together. The audience erupted in applause. Among the crowd was Sarah, a young single mother whom Elena had mentored over the past 6 months. Sarah's once weary face now glowed with confidence. Sitting beside her was her daughter, Clara, who waved enthusiastically at Elena. Sarah's journey had begun in despair. She had moved to Meadowbrook, seeking refuge from an abusive relationship, burdened by financial insecurity and emotional scars. Initially hesitant to trust anyone, she had reluctantly attended a Hearts United event after seeing a flyer at the local grocery store. Elena had greeted her that evening with a warm smile and an open heart. Over countless conversations, Elena shared her own struggles and triumphs, showing Sarah that resilience was not just about surviving, but about finding strength in connection. Under Elena's guidance, Sarah began to rebuild her life. She secured stable housing, found a part-time job, and even enrolled in a vocational training program. During the meeting, Sarah stood to share her story. Her voice, once shaky and uncertain, now carried a quiet strength. When I came here, I didn't think anyone could understand what I was going through. But Elena and Hearts United gave me hope. They reminded me that I wasn't alone. And now, I'm proud to say that I'm standing on my own 2 feet. The room erupted into cheers and applause. Sarah's story was just one of many, a testament to the ripple effect that Elena's perseverance had sparked. At Meadowbrook High School, a new initiative was taking shape. Inspired by Hearts United, Jordan Harper had founded the Kindness Initiative, a student-led program aimed at promoting inclusivity and community service. The initiative's first project was a coat drive for local families, and the response had been overwhelming. Jordan's leadership and passion had ignited a sense of purpose among his peers. On the day of the coat drive, students worked tirelessly to collect, sort, and distribute donations. By evening, the gymnasium was filled with racks of winter coats, boots, and scarves. As Jordan handed a coat to a young boy, the child's mother placed a hand on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking with emotion. "This means so much to us." Jordan's heart swelled with pride. He saw in that moment the true impact of their efforts, a reflection of the values his mother had instilled in him. Later that evening, he shared his thoughts with Elena. "You've always told me that kindness matters, Mom. Now, I see what you meant. It's not just about helping people. It's about reminding them they're valued." Word of Hearts United's success began to spread beyond Meadowbrook. A feature article in a prominent newspaper highlighted the organization's grassroots approach to addressing social inequities. Journalists lauded Elena's leadership, dubbing her a quiet revolutionary who had transformed her pain into purpose. The attention brought inquiries from other towns and cities looking to replicate Meadowbrook's model. Elena and her team found themselves fielding invitations to speak at conferences, participate in panels, and consult with community leaders. Though the spotlight was new and sometimes overwhelming, Elena approached each opportunity with humility and a steadfast commitment to the cause. One invitation in particular stood out: a national social justice conference in Washington, D.C. Elena was hesitant at first, worried about leaving Meadowbrook even for a few days. But with encouragement from Mayor Hayes and her children, she agreed to attend. The Grand Hall in Washington buzzed with anticipation as leaders, activists, and policymakers from across the country gathered for the conference's keynote session. Elena stood backstage, clutching her note cards, her nerves threatening to overpower her resolve. Then she thought of Meadowbrook, of Sarah, of Jordan, of the countless lives that had been touched by Hearts United. Taking a deep breath, she stepped onto the stage, greeted by a wave of applause. "Good evening," she began, her voice steady but warm. "My name is Elena Harper, and I am here because of a simple truth. No one should have to face life's hardships alone. In my town, we learned that by coming together, we could create something extraordinary. A community where kindness isn't just an idea, but a way of life." Elena shared her journey, from the lonely walks to the diner, to the collective effort that had transformed Meadowbrook. Her words resonated deeply, drawing both tears and a standing ovation. As she left the stage, several attendees approached her, eager to learn more about how to bring Hearts United's principles to their own communities. Back in Meadowbrook, the conference had sparked new energy. Hearts United began partnering with organizations across the region, expanding its reach and resources. The nonprofit's programs now included mentorship for single parents, financial literacy workshops, and youth leadership training. Elena worked tirelessly, but she was no longer alone. Volunteers and staff members shared her vision, each bringing their own skills and passion to the table. Together, they built bridges that connected people across divides of race, class, and circumstance. One evening, as Elena and her children gathered around the dinner table, Jordan shared an idea. "What if we started a national network of programs like Hearts United? There are so many towns that could use this kind of support." Elena smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "That's a big dream, Jordan. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that big dreams are worth pursuing." The conversation sparked a flurry of ideas, with Lila suggesting ways to involve schools and Jordan outlining potential partnerships. As the evening wore on, Elena felt a deep sense of fulfillment. Her children were not just beneficiaries of the community's kindness, they were becoming leaders in their own right. The ripple effect of Hearts United showed no signs of slowing. In Meadowbrook, the organization's impact continued to grow, fostering a culture of compassion and resilience. Beyond the town, its principles inspired communities across the nation to embrace the power of unity. Elena often reflected on how far they had come. What had started as a solitary struggle had blossomed into a movement, a legacy that would endure for generations. And though the journey was far from over, she faced the future with hope, knowing that together they could achieve anything. The golden rays of a new dawn stretched across the quiet streets of Meadowbrook. The town, once riddled with subtle divides, now buzzed with the energy of unity and hope. The story of Elena Harper and her family had become a symbol of resilience and community spirit, inspiring neighbors to embrace compassion and break down invisible barriers. But for Elena, This day felt like a personal threshold, a step into a future she had once dared only to dream of. In the weeks following Jordan's graduation, Elena found herself reflecting on the unexpected opportunities now unfolding before her. One morning, she received a call from Robert Hayes, the town's mayor and her steadfast ally. His voice, warm and encouraging, carried news that left her momentarily speechless. "Elena, we've secured funding for the nonprofit, Meadowbrook Family Outreach," Hayes said. "We've been discussing this for months, and I truly believe your experience would make you an invaluable part of the team. Would you consider becoming our community outreach coordinator?" The title sounded almost surreal to Elena. A year ago, she would have laughed at the idea of holding a formal role in any organization, let alone one dedicated to helping others. For so long, her focus had been survival. Walking to work, providing for Jordan and Lila, and shielding them from the harsher realities of life. But now, the idea of stepping into a position where she could actively shape change, especially for struggling families like her own, felt both exhilarating and daunting. "I'd be honored," Elena finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "Thank you for believing in me." Elena's first day at the nonprofit was met with a mixture of nerves and determination. Dressed in a modest yet professional outfit, a gift from a supportive neighbor, she arrived at the modest office space, tucked away in Meadowbrook's revitalized community center. The space buzzed with activity, a reflection of the hope the organization had already begun to instill in the town. Hayes introduced her to the small but passionate team, a retired social worker named Martha, a bright-eyed intern named Sophia, and Victor, a logistics coordinator known for his resourcefulness. Together, they welcomed Elena, their smiles genuine and filled with the promise of collaboration. Her first task was to organize a workshop for single parents, focusing on financial literacy and job placement. As she delved into the planning, Elena's natural empathy and first-hand experience guided her every decision. She envisioned a program that went beyond resources, one that offered encouragement, practical tools, and above all, a sense of belonging. Meanwhile, Jordan was embarking on a new chapter of his own. Inspired by the mayor's speech and his mother's resilience, he had applied and been accepted to Meadowbrook College, where he planned to study social work. Though the school was only a short drive away, the transition marked a significant milestone for both Jordan and Elena. On his first day of classes, Jordan stood at the doorway of their modest home, his backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom," he said, hesitating slightly, "I just want you to know that everything I do, it's because of you. You've shown me what it means to fight for what matters." Elena's eyes glistened as she pulled him into a hug. "And everything I've done," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion, "is so you and Lila can chase your dreams without fear. Go, make us proud, Jordan." As he walked away, Elena stood on the porch, watching him disappear down the street. Her heart swelled with pride and hope, knowing that her sacrifices had paved the way for her son's brighter future. For Lila, the changes in their lives had ignited her creative spirit. At just 8 years old, she had begun expressing herself through writing and drawing, often crafting stories inspired by her mother's journey. One evening, as Elena prepared dinner, Lila proudly presented her with a handmade book titled A Family's Journey. "It's about us, Mom," Lila explained, her face glowing with excitement. "But I added a dragon to protect us on our journey. That's you. You're the dragon." Elena chuckled, pulling Lila into her lap. "A dragon, huh? I like that," she said, flipping through the colorful pages. "You're my little storyteller, Lila. Don't ever stop creating." Lila beamed, her confidence growing with each word of encouragement. For Elena, these small moments with her daughter were a reminder of why she had fought so hard to rebuild their lives. As weeks turned into months, Elena's role at the nonprofit began to flourish. She spearheaded initiatives that brought people together, from organizing clothing drives to hosting town hall meetings where residents could voice their concerns. Her genuine approach and unwavering dedication quickly earned her the respect of her colleagues and the community. One of her proudest achievements was the creation of a mentorship program pairing struggling single parents with experienced community members. The program's first participant, a young mother named Sarah, reminded Elena of herself not so long ago. Through their conversations, Elena offered Sarah not just practical advice, but also the reassurance that she wasn't alone. "You're stronger than you think," Elena told her during one of their meetings, "and it's okay to lean on others when you need to. That's how we grow." Under Elena's guidance, Meadowbrook Family Outreach became a beacon of hope for the town. The community's perception of Elena had shifted completely. Where once there had been whispers of judgment, there was now admiration and gratitude. Families who had once felt isolated began to find connection and support, their lives enriched by the programs Elena and her team had built. At the heart of this transformation was a growing sense of unity. Neighbors who had once passed each other without a word now gathered regularly for potlucks and volunteer events. The walls of division had crumbled, replaced by bridges of empathy and collaboration. On a crisp autumn evening, Elena sat on her porch, a cup of tea warming her hands. The stars above Meadowbrook seemed brighter than ever, a reflection of the hope that now infused the town. In the distance, she could hear the faint hum of laughter from a nearby block party, one of many events that had become a staple of the community. As she gazed out at the quiet street, Elena allowed herself to dream. She envisioned expanding the nonprofit's reach, creating resources for single parents in neighboring towns. She imagined a future where no one felt the isolation she had once endured, where every family had the support they needed to thrive. For the first time in years, the future didn't feel like an insurmountable challenge. It felt like a promise, one she was determined to keep. Elena's journey had taken her from the depths of struggle to the heights of hope. Through resilience, compassion, and the unwavering support of her community, she had built a new life for herself and her children. And as she looked toward the horizon, she knew that this new beginning was just the start of something extraordinary. The morning sun spilled golden light over Meadowbrook's town square, where a crowd gathered to celebrate the long-awaited launch of the nonprofit program, Hearts United. The air buzzed with excitement, and a banner overhead read, "Together we thrive." This was no ordinary gathering. It was the culmination of a year of resilience, collaboration, and the relentless spirit of a community determined to rise above its past. At the center of it all stood Elena Harper, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and disbelief. Once the woman who walked 10 miles daily to survive, she now stood as a beacon of hope for others. She was joined by Mayor Robert Hayes, whose steadfast leadership had been instrumental in making Hearts United a reality. The square was decorated with balloons, streamers, and an impressive display of booths representing various community initiatives, childcare services, job placement programs, and mental health counseling. Children darted between the booths, laughter mingling with the murmur of excited conversation. Mayor Hayes stepped onto the makeshift stage, greeted by thunderous applause. His speech was brief but powerful, highlighting the town's journey from division to unity. "Hearts United isn't just a program," he said, his voice steady and warm. "It's a promise, a commitment to ensuring no one in our community feels alone in their struggles." And none of this would be possible without the incredible resilience and leadership of Elena Harper. The applause grew louder as Hayes gestured for Elena to join him on stage. She hesitated for a moment, her nerves threatening to overwhelm her. But the sight of Jordan and Lila cheering from the front row gave her the courage to step forward. "Thank you," Elena began, her voice trembling slightly. "Hearts United isn't just about me. It's about us, all of us. It's about turning struggles into strength and compassion into action. This community has shown me that we're strongest when we stand together. And I promise to carry that lesson forward every day." As she spoke, the crowd fell silent, hanging on her every word. By the time she finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the square. After the speeches, the event transformed into a celebration of unity. Families explored the booths, learning about the services now available through Hearts United. Elena found herself moving through the crowd, answering questions, sharing stories, and listening to the experiences of others. At one booth, she met a father named Daniel, who had recently lost his job and was struggling to provide for his 2 young daughters. "I didn't know where to turn," he admitted, his voice heavy with emotion. "But seeing what you've built here, it gives me hope." Elena placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone, Daniel. We're here to help. And you'll get through this, I promise." Nearby, a group of children painted a mural symbolizing the community's journey. Lila eagerly joined in, her laughter ringing out as she added a bright orange sun to the corner of the canvas. As the day unfolded, it became clear that Hearts United was more than a local initiative. It was the start of a movement. Attendees included representatives from neighboring towns, eager to learn from Meadowbrook's success and replicate it in their own communities. Hayes, ever the visionary, had already begun talks of expanding the program's reach. "We're setting an example," he told Elena during a quiet moment. "What we've built here can inspire change far beyond Meadowbrook. And it's all because of you." Elena shook her head, humility evident in her expression. "It's because of all of us," she corrected. "No one person can do this alone." By late afternoon, the impact of Hearts United was already palpable. A young mother named Sarah, one of the program's first participants, shared her story with a small group gathered at the mentorship booth. "When I first came here, I felt invisible," she said, her voice steady but emotional. "But Elena showed me that my struggles didn't define me. She believed in me. And because of that, I started to believe in myself." Her words resonated deeply, drawing nods and murmurs of agreement from the listeners. For Elena, moments like this were the true measure of success, not just the resources provided, but the hope rekindled in people's lives. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the square in a warm golden glow, Elena found herself standing at the edge of the crowd, watching as the day's events began to wind down. The mural painted by the children was complete, a vibrant tapestry of color and hope that would soon hang in the community center as a symbol of their shared journey. Jordan approached her, his face glowing with pride. "Mom," he said, "you've done something incredible here." Elena smiled, pulling him into a hug. "We've done it, Jordan. This is just the beginning." That night, as she sat on her porch with a cup of tea, Elena allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. The day's events had left her both exhilarated and deeply humbled. Hearts United wasn't just a program. It was a legacy, one that would continue to grow and evolve long after she was gone. She thought of the people she had met, the stories they had shared, and the transformations already beginning to take shape. Most of all, she thought of her children, whose futures now seemed brighter than ever. For the first time in years, Elena felt not just hope, but certainty. certainty that the struggles she had endured had led to something meaningful, certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Elena made a silent promise to keep building, to keep dreaming, and to ensure that the flame of compassion and unity sparked in Meadowbrooks would never fade. Hearts United was no longer just an idea. It was a lifeline, a testament to the power of community and the resilience of the human spirit. And as Elena Harper looked out over the quiet streets of Meadowbrook, she knew that their story was far from over. This was only the beginning of a movement that would change countless lives, one act of kindness at a time. Meadowbrook was changing, its heartbeat now an echo of compassion and unity. The launch of Hearts United had created a ripple effect that transformed not only the lives of those it directly touched, but also the attitudes and aspirations of the town's youth. For Elena Harper, these changes were more than just symbols of progress. They were the seeds of a brighter future, nurtured by the same resilience and determination she had fought so hard to instill in her own children. In the quiet of the family's modest home, Jordan sat hunched over his laptop, his focus unshakable. A cup of tea cooled beside him as he typed furiously, the glow of the screen illuminating his determined expression. The project he was working on was more than an academic requirement. It was a mission born from the values his mother had modeled for him. Jordan's sociology professor had assigned a community-based project, and instead of choosing something conventional, Jordan decided to create a documentary titled Resilient Roots: The Power of a United Community. The film would highlight the transformation of Meadowbrook through the lens of his mother's journey and the profound impact of Hearts United. Late into the evening, Jordan interviewed residents who had experienced firsthand the ripple effects of the program. He spoke with Sarah, who had secured stable employment through the mentorship initiative, and Daniel, who had found new confidence as a father. Each story painted a vivid picture of resilience and renewal. At one point, Jordan turned the camera on Elena. Though hesitant at first, she eventually agreed, her words reflecting the quiet wisdom of someone who had lived through immeasurable trials. "It's not about how far you've fallen," she said, her voice steady. "It's about how you rise and who you let help you along the way." When the documentary was completed, Jordan hosted a small screening at the community center. The room was packed with neighbors, students, and even Mayor Hayes. As the film played, the audience fell silent, captivated by the stories of hope and transformation. By the time the credits rolled, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Afterward, a classmate approached Jordan, her voice trembling with emotion. "Your documentary. It's incredible. It made me realize how much one person's strength can inspire a whole community." Jordan smiled, his heart swelling with pride, not just for the project, but for the mother who had made it all possible. Meanwhile, Lila's creative spark continued to flourish. Her love for storytelling had grown into a passion for writing and art, and she spent hours crafting intricate tales that blended the struggles and triumphs of her family with imaginative elements. One day, her teacher at Meadowbrook Elementary assigned a class project to create a story that reflected the theme of courage. Lila poured her heart into the assignment, writing a vivid narrative titled The Dragon Who Never Gave Up. In the story, a fierce yet kind dragon protects her young while navigating a treacherous world, overcoming challenges with wisdom and determination. When Lila read the story aloud to her classmates, they listened with rapt attention. By the time she reached the ending, where the dragon inspires an entire kingdom to stand together against adversity, the room erupted in applause. Her teacher, Ms. Reynolds, was so moved by the story that she submitted it to a statewide young writers competition. Weeks later, Lila received the thrilling news. Her story had won first place. At the awards ceremony, she stood on stage, clutching her certificate, her cheeks flushed with pride, as she dedicated the story to her mother. "Everything I wrote," Lila said into the microphone, her voice steady despite the large audience, "is inspired by my mom. She's my dragon." Elena, seated in the front row, felt tears stream down her cheeks as the crowd erupted into applause. In that moment, she realized the depth of the legacy she was building, not just for her children, but for an entire generation. As Jordan and Lila grew into their own, the town's youth began to mirror their example. Inspired by the work of Hearts United, students at Meadowbrook High School launched a kindness initiative aimed at fostering inclusivity and support among peers. Weekly meetings were held in the school library, where students brainstormed ways to make a difference, from organizing food drives to creating mentorship programs for younger kids. One standout student, a shy but passionate teenager named Mia, found her voice through the initiative. At a school assembly, she shared her own struggles with self-doubt and how seeing Elena's story had given her the courage to believe in herself. "If Mrs. Harper can face everything she has and still find the strength to help others," Mia said, her voice trembling, "then I know I can do the same." Her words sparked a standing ovation, and afterward, students approached Elena, thanking her for being an inspiration, not just to adults, but to them as well. Elena, moved by the growing momentum among the town's youth, began dreaming of ways to further support their efforts. One evening, as she sat on her porch with Mayor Hayes, she shared her idea for a scholarship program. "I want to create something that encourages young people to lead with kindness," she explained. "A way to show them that their actions, no matter how small, can create lasting change." Hayes nodded thoughtfully. "We could call it the Resilient Roots Scholarship," he suggested. "It's perfect, a tribute to the resilience you've shown and the roots you've planted in this community." Within months, the scholarship program became a reality, funded by donations from local businesses and residents. The first recipients included Mia and Jordan, whose dedication to service and community had already made a lasting impact. As Meadowbrook continued to thrive, the influence of Hearts United extended beyond the town's borders. Other communities began reaching out, eager to replicate the program's success. Elena found herself invited to speak at events and conferences, sharing her journey and the lessons Meadowbrook had learned. One memorable invitation came from a nearby city struggling with its own divisions. Elena, accompanied by Jordan and Lila, spoke before a packed auditorium. Her message was simple yet profound. Unity isn't about erasing differences. It's about celebrating them and finding strength in each other's stories. The response was overwhelming. People lined up to thank her, sharing their own struggles and aspirations. One young man, a recent immigrant, told Elena, "Your story gives me hope that I can find my place here." On a crisp winter morning, Elena stood in the Meadowbrook town square, watching as volunteers loaded boxes of donations into trucks bound for neighboring towns. Jordan and Lila stood beside her, their faces glowing with pride. "Look at what we've built," Jordan said, his voice filled with awe. Elena smiled, her heart full. "It's not just us," she replied. "It's everyone. And this is only the beginning." As the trucks rumbled away, carrying the spirit of Meadowbrook far and wide, Elena felt a deep sense of fulfillment. The next generation was ready to carry the torch, and she knew they would do so with the same resilience and compassion that had defined her own journey. Elena Harper's story had become more than a tale of personal triumph. It was a legacy of hope, carried forward by the hands of her children and the hearts of a united community. The morning sun rose gently over Meadowbrook, casting its warm light on the bustling town square. Children ran across the park laughing, neighbors chatted warmly, and the faint hum of a distant truck carried supplies for Hearts United's newest outreach program. The transformation Meadowbrook had undergone was unmistakable. The once quiet, insular town now radiated the vibrant spirit of compassion and unity. For Elena Harper, today was not just another day. It was the culmination of a journey that had reshaped her life and the lives of countless others. Elena stood on the porch of her modest home, gazing out at the street where her story had truly begun. She could still remember those early mornings when she walked miles to the diner, burdened with worry, but fueled by determination. Back then, she could never have imagined how far her journey would take her. Her children, Jordan and Lila, were no longer the young, uncertain souls she had once fiercely protected. Jordan, now thriving at Meadowbrook College, had found his calling in social work and was already mentoring other students through a campus initiative inspired by Hearts United. Lila, with her boundless creativity, had become the pride of Meadowbrook Elementary. Her stories and art projects winning hearts and awards alike. Elena herself had grown in ways she never thought possible. As the community outreach coordinator for Meadowbrook Family Outreach, she was now a leader, an advocate, and a mentor. Yet despite all the progress, Elena remained humble, her heart firmly rooted in gratitude for the community that had lifted her and her family. The town square was alive with anticipation as residents gathered for a special ceremony honoring Mayor Robert Hayes. After years of dedicated service, Hayes was stepping down, leaving behind a legacy defined by empathy and action. The square, adorned with colorful banners and the smiling faces of Meadowbrook's people, reflected the mayor's profound impact on the town. Elena watched from the front row, her heart swelling with pride for the man who had not only helped her, but had also united an entire community. As Hayes took the stage, the applause was deafening. His speech, a mixture of nostalgia and hope, struck a chord with everyone present. "I've had the privilege of serving a town that has taught me more about humanity than I ever thought possible," Hayes began, his voice steady yet emotional. "But the real credit belongs to the people of Meadowbrook, people like Elena Harper, who remind us that strength and kindness can change the world." He turned to Elena, his eyes glinting with pride. "Elena, your resilience has been a light for all of us. Today, as I step down, I am confident that Meadowbrook will continue to thrive because of leaders like you." Elena felt tears well in her eyes as the crowd erupted into applause. The moment was bittersweet, a goodbye to a friend and mentor, but also a celebration of the legacy they had built together. As the ceremony ended, Hayes approached Elena, extending a small symbolic gift, a handcrafted key to the city, inscribed with the words, "Strength through Unity." "Elena," he said, placing the key in her hands, "this isn't just a token. It's a reminder that you and everyone here hold the key to Meadowbrook's future. You've proven that one person's determination can ignite a movement." "Thank you, Robert," Elena replied, her voice trembling. "But I couldn't have done this alone. You gave me the courage to believe in something bigger than myself." Hayes smiled. "That's the beauty of it. We never do this alone." In the months following Hayes' retirement, Hearts United expanded its reach beyond Meadowbrook. The nonprofit became a model for community-driven change, attracting attention from neighboring towns and even state organizations. Elena found herself traveling to conferences and workshops, sharing Meadowbrook's story and encouraging other communities to embrace the principles of unity and kindness. One memorable event took Elena to the state capitol, where she was invited to deliver a keynote speech at a forum on community resilience. Standing before an audience of leaders, activists, and policymakers, she spoke with the same quiet strength that had carried her through her darkest days. Our greatest strength lies in our connections, Elena said, her voice steady. When we choose compassion over judgment, action over indifference, we create the kind of world we want our children to inherit. Meadowbrook taught me that unity isn't just an idea. It's a way of life. Her words earned a standing ovation. But for Elena, the true reward was the conversations that followed. Dozens of attendees approached her, eager to learn from her experiences and bring similar initiatives to their own communities. Back in Meadowbrook, the ripple effects of Elena's journey continued to grow. Jordan's documentary, Resilient Roots, had sparked a statewide campaign promoting community service, while Lila's stories were now being shared in classrooms and libraries across the county. One evening, Elena joined Jordan at Meadowbrook College for a panel discussion on the power of youth activism. As she listened to students share their ideas and aspirations, she felt a deep sense of pride, knowing that the values she had fought to instill in her children were now inspiring others. "I want to create a mentorship program for kids in underserved areas," one student said. "If Mrs. Harper's story has taught me anything, it's that everyone deserves someone who believes in them." Elena smiled, her heart swelling with hope. The future was in good hands. On a quiet summer evening, Elena found herself sitting on the same bench in the town square where she had once paused during her long walks to the diner. This time, she wasn't burdened by exhaustion or worry. Instead, she was surrounded by the laughter of children playing nearby and the hum of life in a community transformed by kindness. As she watched Lila chase fireflies with a group of friends and Jordan chat animatedly with his peers, Elena felt a profound sense of peace. The struggles that had once defined her life now seemed like distant memories, replaced by the joy of seeing her family and her town thrive. Elena's story had become more than just her own. It was woven into the fabric of Meadowbrook, a testament to the power of resilience and the beauty of a united community. The town's transformation stood as a beacon for others, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, compassion could prevail. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the town, Elena rose from the bench and joined her children. Together, they walked toward their home, their laughter mingling with the sounds of a town that had embraced them with open arms. Elena Harper's legacy was clear. Through love, determination, and the unwavering belief in the power of kindness, she had not only changed her own life, but had inspired an entire generation to dream, to act, and to believe in the strength of unity. As the sun sets over Meadowbrook, Elena's story reminds us of something profound. Resilience isn't built alone. It's nurtured by the hands that reach out, the hearts that care, and the strength we find in each other. What did Elena's journey spark in you? Did her unwavering determination or the community's transformation touch something within your heart? Share your thoughts below. We'd love to hear your take on this extraordinary story. And if you're as moved by these tales of hope and humanity as we are, hit that subscribe button and join us for the next journey. There's always another story waiting to inspire, to teach, and to remind us all of the power we hold when we stand together. Don't miss it. See you next time.